Have you ever noticed that the things we run from tend to grow larger the further we retreat? It is a strange trick of the mind that an avoided task or a hidden fear gains strength not from its own power, but from the energy of our escape. In a dense, ancient jungle where the shadows stretched long and the canopy whispered secrets, a sound began to echo that shook the very earth. It was a deep, guttural roar, a sound so terrifying it felt like the mountains themselves were groaning in pain. Land. First came the rabbit, his ears flat against his head, bolting through the ferns without looking back. "The monster is coming," he shrieked. Then came the deer, her slender legs trembling as she leaped over fallen logs in a desperate bid for safety. Even the lion, the supposed king of the forest, let out a nervous growl and retreated, his golden eyes wide with a panic no predator should ever know. Soon, the heaviest of them all arrived, the elephant, crashing through the trees, his massive heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. They all gathered at the edge of the great river, certain that an ancient demon had awakened to claim the woods. Lambs to the casual observer, these were the strongest and swiftest creatures of the wild, yet they were all defeated. They weren't defeated by claws or teeth, but by a sound they didn't understand. They sat in the mud, paralyzed, mourning the home they thought they had lost forever, And then a tiny ant crawled into the clearing. He was no larger than a grain of sand, and his only weapon was a steady focus. He looked up at the trembling giants and asked, "Why do you run?" "Yo, the roar," the elephant trumpeted. "It is the sound of 1,000 nightmares. It is behind that great banyan tree, and it is growing louder by the second." Metz, the ant didn't look for a hole to hide in. Instead, he turned his small body toward the source of the noise. He didn't have the lion's claws or the elephant's tusks, but he had a different kind of strength, the courage to look. While the others stayed pinned by their imagination, the ant marched toward the great banyan tree. With every step, the roar became more deafening, shaking his tiny frame, yet he did not turn back. Leaned, he reached the massive trunk and climbed up onto a hollow, dried-out log that acted as a natural megaphone. There, he found a tiny, fuzzy caterpillar. The caterpillar was simply munching on a leaf, and every time he moved his legs against the hollow wood, the sound vibrated and echoed through the valley, amplified 1,000 times by the shape of the log. Mome the ant let out a tiny, triumphant chirp. He called the giants over. One by one, the lion, the deer, and the elephant peered behind the tree. They saw the monster, a tiny insect with an echo. They realized that their fear hadn't been based on a threat, but on the distance they had placed between themselves and the truth. Lemdiaz, the story of the ant and the caterpillar, teaches us that most of our fears are not giants. They are small things with loud echoes. When we avoid a conversa, thinking about a problem makes it complex. Butchin, a decision or a problem, we allow our imagination to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Just like the caterpillar's roar, the longer we run, the more monstrous the problem feels. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the simple act of turning around to look. The ant wasn't stronger than the lion. He was just more curious than he was afraid. Facing a problem head-on usually reveals that the monster is much smaller than we imagined. Anti-facing a problem makes it simple. Once the animals saw the caterpillar, the fear vanished instantly. Reality is rarely as terrifying as the stories we tell ourselves in the dark. Stop running from the noise. Turn around, walk toward the banyan tree, and face your caterpillar. You will find that once you look it in the eye, the roar stops and your life begins.